Hello and welcome to Inside Sport. I'm your host Mark Philpott, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the clash in Pretoria between the Australian Wallabies and the South African Springboks. So round number one, game number one in this year's Rugby Championship, and we headed off to the wonderful city of Pretoria to the Loftus Versfeld Stadium, and 52,000 people packed the stadium today to watch this first game in the Rugby Championship game. Now, only 3 international teams had ever won in this stadium before. They were the New Zealand All Blacks, England and the British Lions. Australia had never won in 7 attempts playing in Pretoria. Away, I'm actually making the first part of this video at half time, so I've just finished watching the first half, and it was a really interesting start to the game because, as you would expect, first game of the new championship, both teams were really finding their way, finding their feet, working each other out, and there was a little bit of a kicking duel in the first few minutes. But after Manie Libbok had missed a penalty for the Springboks in the 3rd minute, it was in the 8th minute that Australia started a good attack around the halfway line, went down the left-hand side of the field, and Marika Koroibete found himself in space on the left-hand wing, and he ran in a brilliant try right in the corner. It was a great try by the Australians. After a good build-up, they cleared the ball out quickly from the breakdown, threw it out to the left-hand side. Quade Cooper made a good cut-out pass to put Koroibete away, and he scored a great try in the corner. Reece Hodge was unable to get the conversion for the sideline, and the score was 5-0. Then a few minutes later, we had the South Africans getting a penalty, and Libbok put over that penalty to bring us back to 5-3 in favour of Australia. I then felt the South Africans started to take things up a notch, and they really started to play really well at the breakdowns. They were committing men to the breakdown, and the important thing I thought was they were actually staying connected in the breakdown as well. So they were giving the protection of the ball really well, and a few minutes later we saw a breakout from the South Africans down the left side, and Ardency went over for his first try in the first half. A great try from the South Africans. They really split the Australians open, and we started to see for the first time in the match the Australian defence being put under the hammer there. It was a great try by the South Africans. Libbok went on to get the conversion, so immediately we had the Springboks out to 10-5. So after 16 minutes, it was 10-5 to the Springboks, and as the game continued, the Boks continued to put more and more pressure on the Australians. The Australian went to the kicking game quite a bit, and whilst their kicks were quite good, I thought, in terms of tactical kicking, the response that they got from South Africa was actually even better. So the Springboks were able to break the Australian line. If they weren't able to break the line, they were able to recycle various phases of the ball and get it back to their own side. And I started to see that this was breaking down the Australian defence. But also, we've got to remember, we're playing in Pretoria. The altitude was starting to take an effect. So in the 30th minute, we saw a great build-up by South Africa down the middle of the field, and then they came left, and the ball came out to Ardency, who was wide on the left-hand side. There was no cover defence in place from the Wallabies, and Ardency went over for his second and much easier try than his first one. So the South Africans extended their lead at this stage to 15-5. The conversion was kicked over, 17-5. Libbok got that one. And we started, I felt at that stage, to really feel as though the South Africans were starting to take the ascendancy in this match, particularly because their work around the breakdown, maintaining the Australians. When the Australians did get a break, it looked like South Africa had them covered from a defensive point of view. And again, Australia weren't getting much of the possession about this stage of the game. The Springboks were up to 63% of the possession in hand. So I think that was starting to actually take a toll on the Australians by the time we started getting closer to half-time. Tom Hooper was having a great game for Australia as flanker, but he unfortunately got a big hit in the 30th minute and he went off for an HIA and never came back, so he won't be starting the second half today, but he was playing really, really well. Impressed with this guy. It's the first time I've seen Tom Hooper play. He's not Michael Hooper's brother, by the way, or cousin, but he was really, really good for the short time that he was on. Australia are going to really miss him, I feel, in the second half. So I feel if I was to summarise this half of rugby, I'd say that the Australian defence was a little bit passive. The Springboks were finding ways to get holding on to the ball, punching up through the middle, and they were definitely making inroads into the Australian defence and then able to switch the ball out wide. And I think there's a couple of times there the Springboks could have got away for a couple of more tries. If they just had one more pass in hand, they would have done it. But so far, pretty impressed with the Springboks. I think the Boks having a good game for the Springboks. Esthuizen is also playing really well. He's made a couple of dents up through the middle. Leroux's done pretty well with his kicking, except for on one occasion. And over the park, Dwayne Van Meulen is leading by example again. Tough up in the forwards. I think most of the South African forwards are having a good game at this stage. And really, I just see that the momentum is building for the Springboks. So I think in the second half, we're going to have to watch out for Australia, whether the floodgates might open here as they get more and more tired. Maybe they'll come out with a bit of reassertion because of what Eddie Jones puts into them during the half-time break. But I think in the second half, this could be a big score if the Wallabies don't step up in the first 20 minutes. I can see them fading away in the last 20 minutes just due to their fitness. First game of this international series up against an extremely strong Springbok side. And this could roll out to be a pretty big score. But let's wait and see. We've got the second half coming up. It's 17 points to 5 to the Springboks at halftime. Been very impressed with the Springboks at the moment, particularly around the breakdowns. I think they're doing a great job there, clearing the ball, holding the ball, controlling the ball, and getting in there and competing very quickly for the ball. Much more so than the Wallabies. The Wallabies are having a little bit more difficulty in clearing the ball out. Therefore, their backs are a little bit more under pressure. They're putting the kicks up and having to give their territory gains through that kicking game at this stage. But let's see, everything could change in the second half. 17. Now, thanks very much for tuning into my video today. This is my full-time gig, making YouTube videos now, I've decided, because I want to follow through the rugby season. And if you like what you're hearing and seeing in these videos, please subscribe to my channel. It really means a lot. I'm trying to get to that magical 1,000 subs. So if you want to give me a sub, that would be fantastic. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. How did you think that first half went? So as the second half got underway, we were wondering whether the Wallabies were going to be able to make a comeback in this game. But the first 10 minutes of the second half really determined the outcome of this game. The South African forwards just went into overdrive. I call it beast mode. They went into beast mode and they put on 9 phases of driving forward towards the Wallabies line. And really it was from that domination that the Springboks started that second half after the 11th minute mark of the second half. The ball came out wide again onto the left-hand side and Ardency went over for his 3rd try in this match so far. So that took the halftime score from 17 points to 5 out to 22 to 5. Lebok missed the conversion from the sideline, so the score stayed at 22 points to 5. Now, I did say at half-time that Tom Hooper went off with an HIA. He didn't, in fact, he damaged his shoulder, and that was the reason that he stayed off the field in the second half. So the Australians made a number of replacements as we went through the second half. But that was the way that the Springboks started the second half, and it only got worse for the Australians from there on in. The Springboks really started to dominate this game, and it was a combination of power up front as well as skill execution. So not only have the Springboks brought this amazing power to the game and to the championship this year, they also brought skill execution. So you could see that their forwards combining with their backs were tremendous in building momentum to go to forward to break down the Wallabies' defence throughout this whole game. And then a few passages of play later, the Boks were on the attack again through their forwards, moving rapidly in breakdown mauls towards the Australian line. and David Porecki from Australia decided to, unintentionally I think, but he happened to bring it down. He brought the rolling maul down just short of the line, and Ben O'Keefe, the referee of today's game, decided to go upstairs, have a look at it, see whether he felt it was deliberate, and it was deemed that it was. So the Wallabies had not only given away another penalty try, but they had also put a man in the bin. So a double blow there for the Wallabies, but really it was under immense Springbok pressure. There was no doubt in my mind they were going to score a try at that stage anyway, and Porecki ended up being sent off for that infringement to the sin bin, and that put the Australians under even more pressure by being a man down. That took us out to 29 points to 5 in favour of the Springboks, and really the writing was on the wall continually for the Wallabies in the second half. Possession was continuing to grow for the Springboks, and I didn't really see a way back into this game for the Wallabies, because whatever they were trying with the small amount of possession they were getting, they weren't executing their kicks very well in the second half. In fact, some of their kicks, skill execution was very poor. They kicked out on the full, or there was a situation with a line dropout that Quade Cooper sliced the ball and put that out on the full as well. So the Springboks got a 5-metre scrum from that particular phase of play. Then in the 57th minute of the game, we had a bit of a funny incident where the Springboks were again attacking towards the Wallaby line, just on the 22 line. The ball came clear to Lebac, and he seemed to walk towards the goal line and put the ball down for a try. It was called back because the ball had been touched forward by a South African player. The referee again went to the TMO and had that checked, and that was the decision that he made on. Pretty close one. This one could have gone either way. I think it's just one of those calls. But again, the ascendancy that the Springboks were in, it wasn't going to make any difference in this particular game. And whether the try was allowed or disallowed, it was only a matter of time. We felt that the Springboks were going to get over again. In the 60th minute, or just into the 60th minute, we had both teams emptying their benches out, bringing on new players. The Wallabies were starting to look very tired. They'd been doing a lot of tackling, almost the double amount of tackles than the Springboks were doing, and playing at altitude was certainly having an impact on the Wallabies as well. It was in the 69th minute where we saw the Springboks heading towards the Australian line, and as a pass went out to the Springboks backs, we saw Vunivalu from Australia put his hand out somewhat intentionally to stop a pass going by, and it was deemed to be deliberate, and therefore Vunivalu found himself in the sin bin for 10 minutes. Australia were down again to 14 men, and at the same time the Springboks were awarded a penalty try. So that's the last thing the Australians wanted to happen. Again, discipline and execution of defence got in their way in this situation, and losing Vunivalu was a big blow, but the way the Springboks were playing, it was inevitable that I thought they were going to score another try anyway. That infringement blew the score out to 36 points to 5, and at this stage there was no way back for the Wallabies, and it was a matter of just seeing how much the Springboks were going to be able to put on in the last 15 minutes of this game. Well, we didn't have to wait much longer, because just 6 minutes later, in the 75th minute of the game, Steph du Toit picked up the ball after again a dominant forward running pack from the Springboks, got closer to the Wallabies line. Steph du Toit took the ball over the line and scored another try, which put us out to 41 points to 5. The conversion was kicked over, 43 points to 5. Lebac doing a great job with his kicking. I think he only missed one today, which was a penalty from long range. All the rest of it, he was on point. So really, the Wallabies only had the last few minutes really to throw the ball around a little bit and see whether they could get a consolation prize out of this match. And it was in the 81st minute that Carter Gordon, who'd come on as a replacement, had gone over for his first try after some pretty much loose and spontaneous throwing of the ball around by the Wallabies, created some gaps, and they scored a try in the last minute. So scored a try under the post in extra time, and that made the score 43 points to 12. A little bit flattering at the end for the Wallabies there. So look, let's sum up this game, and I think it was a fantastic display from the Springboks. But I'm not going to write any team off yet who has a bad game in their first week. I think there's a lot of factors we need to take into consideration. You know, it's really hard to go to Pretoria and play the Springboks. Fantastic crowd there, over 50,000 in Loftus Versfeld today. And it really is a cauldron of fire going over there to try to play the Boks, particularly when they're in this kind of mood and have this game of the skill level that they're showing today. So Eddie Jones and his team won't be happy with the outcome. There were a few good things I thought that they might look at from this game. And I think the spontaneity they were trying to show is a theme that they need to stick to. But this championship and perhaps the World Cup's going to be won by the set pieces, the dominance up front. And boy, did the South African forwards show a great display of that today. I thought personally, sitting here as a Kiwi doing a neutral analysis of this game today, I was very, very impressed with the Springboks. In fact, they kind of took it up a notch or two from where I thought they would be. I thought they were definitely going to beat the Wallabies today, but they really hammered the Wallabies in the end, and it was an all-round fantastic display. After the first few minutes and the Wallabies scored a try, I thought, okay, this could be game on, but there was no answer after that. The Springboks just scored all those points with no return for the Wallabies until the last few seconds of the game. So I think the South African environment will be very, very happy with this game. Some of their players have already gone to New Zealand for next weekend's big clash against the All Blacks at Eden Park in Auckland. It's going to be a fantastic game, depending on what All Black side turns out, because we know South Africa have got momentum now. We're going to be watching the All Blacks game in a couple of hours' time from now, so it'll be great to see how they respond to this South African onslaught in Pretoria this afternoon. So it was a fantastic game from the Springboks. Players across the park. Ardency, obviously, with his 3 tries, was fantastic. Manny Lebok played fantastic at fly half. I think, if Pollard's going to be injured or have problems in the World Cup, South Africa has a fantastic backup plan there. But the forwards were so impressive today. Everybody across the park was really, really good for the Springboks. I don't think there was a poor performer in the whole match for them as far as their forwards go. The backs had a very solid time as well. Esterhausen played really well, did some really damaging runs that set up great second and third phase ball for the Springboks to pick up and run again. He played really, really well. Willie LaRue had a safe game, 1 or 2 small errors, but on the top of everything, the Springboks backs weren't really tested, were they, in terms of defence throughout the match. So we didn't see a lot there when they were put under pressure. I think the Australian kicking game was a little bit subpar today. I thought in the first half it was better than the second half. The second half they just seemed to lose their way. And let's face it, I think that came about because the pressure they were being put under by the Springboks. So every time they did get the ball in the second half, you found that the Wallabies were under pressure and they made spontaneous decisions that didn't really work out in this particular game. Now, we all know international rugby at this level is a game of inches. Some of those things, if they had turned out right for the Australians, that last pass or whatever, we could have seen a closer game, but that wasn't the case today. And we're not going to be starting to play games and analysing them based on what could have been. So, yeah, Eddie Jones and the team have got a lot of work to do before they face up to Argentina in Sydney in Australia next Saturday. That's going to be their next game. And the pressure's really on Eddie Jones already because there's only 4 more test matches for the Wallabies to get this right and to get these guys playing well together or to find the right combinations. I think he's got a lot of work to do going forward, particularly in the forwards. I think they were totally dominated by the Springboks. And I can see a number of other teams in their pool area that are going to put pressure on them as well in the World Cup. So the All Blacks are going to put pressure on them in a couple of weeks' time. So I think Eddie Jones got a lot of work to do there. I don't think the backs combinations are settled yet. Koroberi brought a great energy, I think, to the match today. He's a real standout player, that guy. He turns up most weeks. He was looking for work. He was great on defence. And he also scored a great try. So Koroberi, I think, is the only one that can really go off that field. Michael Hooper had a big game again. I don't think there's ever a time where we say Michael Hooper doesn't have a great game. But the rest of the Australian forwards, I felt, were overrun and overpowered by the Springboks today. So a great game from the Springboks after round 1 of the Rugby Championship 2023. They take the lead. A couple of hours, as I said, until Argentina play the All Blacks in Mendoza. It'll be interesting to see how that game turns out. So let me know what you think and thought of this particular match. Did you see it going this way? Did you think it was going to be a blowout to South Africa, particularly after half-time? Did you think they were going to run away with it like they did do? Do you think the Australians' discipline let them down? And what do you think Eddie Jones needs to do now to turn this around for Australia? Because let's face it, if we have Australia playing well at the World Cup, then it just puts another level of excitement into the whole competition. And I think as rugby fans, that's what we're all looking for. We're wanting all the top teams to be playing well so that when we get down to that telling knockout stage, that we're seeing some fantastic games with the top teams playing their best games, so the winners can go away feeling proud that they bet their competition when they were playing their best. And I think that's what we all want in the Rugby World Cup. So there we go, round one, game one of the 2023 Rugby Championship. Hope you enjoyed my video. If you do, please drop me a comment, a like, and also subscribe to my channel, trying to build this as we go and gain momentum through the rugby season, heading into the World Cup. And I'll be here for all the other games in the Rugby Championship as well as the World Cup games this year. So thanks very much for watching. I'll be back later on today with a video reviewing the All Blacks against Argentina in Mendoza. Until then, enjoy your rugby and stay well.